the prospects for travel, and as Paul said, what do you think are going to be the ongoing restrictions? Over to you.
Thanks very much, Jim, and afternoon, everybody. I think I've met a reasonable number of you before, but nice to make the acquaintance of the rest of you. I just wanted to cover off several different areas. I'll give you a little bit of a landscape. If we could go to that quick agenda page next door, Monique, that would be great, thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about ATPI very briefly. Then we're going to talk about what we have at the moment. Let's talk about the next steps for getting us into what I think will actually start arriving a little prior to 2022. I think we need to be in Q4 ready to go for travel in 2022. And then reshaping your company's business travel, because what happened, your travel policy, your travel mandates from 18 months ago and prior are pretty much out the window. So maybe I can give you one or two pieces of advice about how travel might occur for the future. And then let's talk about you, because everybody is very concerned about whether they're going to get their gold status or their PPS membership or their whatever they've got with different airlines renewed. So we'll climb straight into it and move straight to a little bit about ATPI. So ATPI is actually, don't say it, but it's a British company with Dutch origins from about 110 years ago. And I was in a private partnership with them. I had a company in New Zealand called Business World Travel. And in fact, it's our 30th anniversary as well, same as KSB, in March next year. So that followed 10 years working for Lufthansa, which is how I got the cornerstone of everything I do is all about Germany. Let's talk a little bit about what ATPI does. It's called Advanced Travel Partners International. We have, I look after quite a few staff in Melbourne as well. We have a big operation there, a very big operation in Perth, and a smaller operation in Sydney. And we have a real mix of different travel. So there's all sorts of different kinds of organisations that ATPI looks after. There's specialist sectors, which I'll talk about in just a second, but basically from the corporate perspective, we're what's called a full service travel management company. Here in Auckland, the office is in Newmarket, and I have a team of people. Yes, I still have a team of people, even though we're in the travel industry. We've got, we were 21 staff members, and I've got still 11 employees working for me. And the others, we have managed to find quite a few jobs out there doing contact tracing, working for various call centres that I'm subcontracting to those companies. So as and when we need the staff, we will bring them back on board. So when the Tasman border opened, for example, we gave everybody an extra day a week of work, which pretty well put them back to full time. Well, that's gone, of course, as you're well aware, but the staff are still there, plenty to do. Let's move on, if that's all right. Thanks, Monique. So there's 100 locations around the world for ATPI. They own now about 60 of those global locations. And ATPI went through an acquisition about 5 years ago, and we were one of the beneficiaries of that. So we'd known ATPI in our network for about 15 years. I'd worked with them, and they bought the company, an independent company in Australia, the member in Singapore. They already had offices in Hong Kong and Manila. And our operation here in New Zealand. They recently purchased, or we recently purchased, I should say these days, Hamburg Süd's travel arm in Germany. So we've got quite a large Lufthansa city centre operation in Germany now. We had a small independent operation in Munich, but now we've merged the two to make a slightly more viable organisation in Germany. So the organisation does corporate travel, which is pretty well what we mostly do here in New Zealand. Those logos across the bottom there reflect what we do. So Direct ATPI, Direct Travel is a very large North American travel company, and they keep their own brand. We have a shareholding in each other's companies there. The biggest part of ATPI, which makes us the only profitable travel management company in the world at the moment, is our marine and energy area. And the marine and energy is actually about 50%, nearly 60% of the heritage of ATPI. And basically, it is what it says it is. We do ships cruise around the world. We do oil and gas cruise. We move people in and out of oil rigs. We do most of the business in Western Australia for mining, so it's a very big specialist area that our organisation's involved in. We obviously don't have too much of that in New Zealand. We're much more into the sustainable energy sectors here in New Zealand, so I've reversed the trend for the organisation. But around the world, ATPI is also very involved in the sustainability sector as well. Corporate events and sports events. So sports events is enormous for ATPI as well. So we look after Man U, for example, and all of their games, all of their sponsors. We looked after here in New Zealand the Volvo Ocean Race, so we do all the travel for all the yachting syndicates, but we also do all the entertainment for all of the sponsors. So it's quite a broad and different organisation. We looked after the Heineken Cup, we're looking after the ICC Cricket World Cup at the moment, so that division is based in Netherlands, and one of the different parts of the Hamburg organisation does that as well. So that's very much a European-based entity that is around the world. So let's talk about the travel landscape today. I thought I'd just let you know what is happening here and now in New Zealand. And of course, as you'd be aware with your own travel, if you're doing any, it depends what day of the week you're talking about, because it's pretty well different every day. So let's just talk about the airlines that are flying at the moment. So domestically, Air New Zealand has obviously been pretty busy. And in our own business, domestic travel used to be just 25% of our business. It's now probably about 80% of our business. But overall, like most travel companies and for Air New Zealand, the domestic numbers have held up really well. If not, they've slightly improved for us because people have got nothing else to spend their money on, just about. But it does come with lots and lots of challenges, lots of our business that we do with online clients. So we have an online booking tool we use for clients. Quite a lot of that gets changed. So it takes a little bit of the process efficiency out of travel at the moment, but our team of travel consultants back that up really nicely. Domestically, you've got new things that occur, and it amazes me that we've got clients from throughout New Zealand who have offices in all different parts of the country. And it's just floored me, the number of people who suddenly, and I'm not sure what they used to do before, but are flying on those new flights from Wellington to Kerikeri and Wellington to Whangarei. They're completely full with waiting lists. And so it's a waiting list. You need a good travel agent to make sure if you want a seat on a plane like that, it will get cleared. And that's kind of what we do. Internationally, the airlines that are flying here, there are actually, if you look up in the sky, you'll see any number of interesting airlines flying across the sky. They're just not all carrying passengers at the moment. So the ones that are carrying the passengers are literally, you've got Air New Zealand who do three runs a week up to LA. They've got one a week to Shanghai, one a week to Tokyo, and one a fortnight to Seoul and Taipei. Taipei slots in once a month. Singapore Airlines has been pretty consistent. They've got 4 a week to Auckland, 4 a week to Christchurch. And after 31st of October, those are going up. So they're increasing to essentially a daily service. The other part of the equation is the most reliable airline in the world, which just became the Skytrax airline of the year, is Qatar Airways. Now, Qatar has been really interesting. When all the other airlines closed down their operations, they kept flying, and they kept flying to New Zealand. So I would say most of the repatriations we've done in our organisation have been with Qatar Airways, because they've been really quite user-friendly for us to deal with. We've got a really good Rolodex in the office. I've got it at home here with me with some really handy phone numbers of important people that we need to speak to get seats on planes. And I think that they are consistent with 3 a week, but they're also flying just about everywhere else in the world as well. Whereas airlines like Emirates, for example, really pulled back on their network. They're flying here 4 times a week at the moment. Cathay's once a week, China Southern's twice a week. But they're all flying actually quite a lot more. So Malaysian Airlines comes in 3 times a week, for example, no passengers, all cargo. Singapore Airlines actually does fly here every day, but the flights are, the balance of the flights are cargo only aircraft. And Qantas is in here every about 3 or 4 times a day. If you look up in the sky, you'll see the red tail flying across the skies in Auckland. And they're all at the moment freight only flights as well. So they're passenger aircraft, but with cargo only on them. Yeah, so there's a range of different things happening airline-wise, and What is absolutely consistent is that they are completely inconsistent, is the message we would send to you. Let's just talk about hotels. Right now, hotels are an interesting conundrum in New Zealand. So if you want to come into Auckland, the only hotels you could stay in really is the Cordis, the Park Hyatt, the Sofitel, the Hilton. And at the 4-star level, most of those have been taken out as MIQ quarantine hotels. And then if you want to go 3-star anywhere around the country, it's worth avoiding. Anything with a kitchen is usually an emergency housing kind of place. So cities like Palmerston North, like Timaru, like Napier, like quite a lot of Auckland, a reasonable amount of Wellington, pretty well all of Rotorua, small pockets in New Plymouth are all emergency housing. So therefore, I'm going to talk in a couple of slides about your travel policies, and that's just a particular concern for anybody. The Australians listening in will laugh at whatever that means, and Monique will sit down and explain it all to you one day.
Right.
Car rentals. Thank goodness for Bryn, because they are the most challenging, one of the more challenging things, let's say, for us this year is trying to find cars for clients, because everybody's been incredibly mobile. And we've been coaching our clients to do all sorts of interesting things. So when somebody rings and says they'd like to have a car from Invercargill to Dunedin, pick up Invercargill, drop off Dunedin, pick up Palmerston North, drop off Wellington, we sit around and have a good old laugh, and we have to recoach them. So most rental car places around the country with Avis or Hertz are franchised. And the franchise owners do not want to let those cars out of their sight because they've got nothing really to rent after that. And so you learn to manage the car rental situation. None of the car rental companies have got fleets anywhere near what they were in 2019. I think Hertz sits at, Bryn would know this more, I'm sure, but I think Hertz sits at about 1/3 of their previous fleet. Avis is almost about 40% of their previous fleet. So they've got literally no cars because they can't buy fleets of cars at the moment anyway. They can't get them into New Zealand. And also they all sold off their fleets of cars because there was no tourists coming in. So you had the double whammy of no tourists and no cars available. And that's why some of those fleet numbers are really low at the moment. The best thing you can do is book your rental car at least a fortnight in advance. Definitely don't take it one way anywhere because nobody wants to rent a car that way. We do get you a car. We will get people a car. We will get people a hotel, and we will get people a seat on a plane. It's just different from how it previously was. Thanks, Monique. So on that side, I forgot to mention Air New Zealand. Air New Zealand is one of the airlines that's still flying internationally, and they're pretty well the only airline we use up to the States. United Airlines is still allegedly putting their daily flight back on in November from, I think it's actually from about 25th of November from San Francisco to Auckland. So let's see whether they press on with that. At the moment, they're saying they're going to do it. So let's talk about your business travel. Fasten your seatbelts for this. It plays a little bit, Paul, into what you were talking about and what you'd read in the Australian today. Talking about getting your staff back travelling, getting yourself back travelling, even getting family members. So it's really just all about permission. You need permission to arrive, you need permission to visit, you need permission to transit, you need permission to quarantine, and you need permission to fly. But most of all, you need permission from your travellers to want to travel. And that, for most people, is the key problem. Let's take yourselves out of the equation if you're expecting colleagues to go travelling. That is a particularly challenging one. So these days we're sort of talking about flying for a purpose rather than just your presence, if you know what I mean. So the clients of ours who are travelling, and we are doing international trips, times probably half a dozen a week. On average, we get away out of the country. Half of those are private clients who are visiting family and friends or elderly relatives, mothers, fathers who just can't wait any longer and have to go and suck up 2 weeks in quarantine, if in fact you can get quarantine. But the other half are business travellers. And so, for example, we're getting today, our client was looking for 5 MIQ spots to get 5 engineers from Scotland, and they've also applied for special assistance from MB anyway to get those in, and they've got a case there. So as far as I'm aware, they didn't get any today, but they do need their engineers here. So you need even if you get your quarantine accommodation, you're still going to be flying for a purpose. And I think that once you get the buy-in from your travellers that they want to go, there's a whole bunch of different things that you need to take into account. Having said all this, there are 2 million people travelling every day at the moment. They're mainly out of around the United States, Asia and Europe, as you imagine. That number will probably double from the 5th of November when the transatlantic opens up again. So our operation in the United Kingdom, as I said previously, has been really incredibly busy. Once that opens, the airlines at the moment cannot keep up. They're trying to find planes and bring back on aircraft. And you will appreciate that to get an aircraft out of the desert and bring it back online, plus relicense all your pilots that you fired, takes time. So these things to gear up an airline or even a single aircraft is a big undertaking. So once that's done, then the floodgates will open. Let's go back to that permission thing. So we have a traveller who's gone to the United Kingdom, a bit of business, and also to see his mother, who's in her failing years, shall we say. So that particular trip changed. He booked it 3 months in advance once he got his MIQ date, but that trip changed 11 times during the booking process. And that simply means the regulations for transit in Singapore or Dubai, for either of those, we had double bookings just to cover the options. Both places changed their transit regulations. So that's the first thing that happens. Second thing that happens is the destination regulations change. So you're in a position where I'll read you something that somebody said to me. Let's take the Auckland context. This is the latest Auckland context. So Auckland remains in level 3, except for a few conditions that permit you to be closer to level 2, but with the restrictions of level 3, while allowing for the level 2 freedoms, but maintaining a level 2 threshold with a level 2 range, while keeping a clear level 3 environment that will allow you to do all these level 2 activities as long as they meet the guidelines of level 3. But this is only on the condition that the level 2 processes are structured to fit inside the level 3 roadmap. Well, that is pretty similar to what happens at every transit stop along the way when you're travelling, and for every stopover point you have, and then the airline regulations change as well. So while that traveller was away, all of a sudden they ended up flying Singapore Airlines. They're leaving 5th of October, so they're leaving tonight from the United Kingdom. But 2 weeks ago, the regulations changed that said with Singapore, you were to do 72 hours. It was the age of your vaccination certificate, but it's now only 36 hours. So you have to get from his place a test 36 hours old and be through Singapore within that 36 hours. So even when you're traveling, things are changing all the time. So agility is really important. And fortunately, he's got a great travel agent. So one of my staff members has literally gone on the trip with him, and in a metaphorical context, and just watching every move and keeping him up to date with all those changes. So we say that travel is not for the faint-hearted, and that simply means that's simply a reflection of that particular trip. But what happens is the airlines are rescheduling their flights all the time. So you set something in concrete. What previously in 2019, 2018, and 2017, you would have got an itinerary from your travel agent, and it would have been the itinerary you're going to travel on. Well, that itinerary will change quite a number of times because airlines are rescheduling all the time. So they'll reschedule by 3 or 4 hours, for example, if not a different day. If they're rescheduling by 3 or 4 hours, it really throws out your pre-vaccination certificate that you had, which was 36 hours. Through Dubai, it's different. Through Doha, it's different. Coming in from LA, it's different. And that's taken even Australia out of this whole equation. So you need people who are a little bit resilient, quite relaxed actually, and don't get too excited by all of these changes. Then of course the airline is delayed on the day, and that also throws quite a lot of people into panic. So coming out of Germany to Singapore, there's now there's a green lane air bubble between the two countries, but that's I understand that's about to be switched off because of Singapore's problems, and they don't want too many COVID cooties coming in from Germany anymore. Unfortunately, apparently they've got enough of their own. So what are we going to do about this? In 2022, you've got the MIQ and the Home Trials Balancing Act, which simply means, I'm not sure if any of you applied for this for the quarantine-free trial, which is 150 people. We heard they're all going to be mates of NZTE. So if you're an NZTE kind of mate, and for us, it's a lot of tokenism. We don't think they'll get that many people because the restrictions are so limited. Firstly, you have to be a Natalie or Nigel no mate. You have to live on your own. You can't be in an air-conditioned premises because you can't live in an apartment because the COVID cooties will go through to the apartment next door, apparently. So there's a whole string of regulations which actually make it just easier to go into an MIQ spot and pay your $3,000. But nonetheless, it needs to be trialled. The South Australia trial has been really successful, and I think that's the one to follow. I think they're just making it work where there just doesn't seem to be intent to want to make it work in this particular country. They're setting it up for failure, and is my belief, and just have no interest really in making it easy for business travellers. Paul, you mentioned the delays in quarantine, and that's at airports. That is correct. Processing time is fine. While the Trans-Tasman was open, I also went over to our office in Melbourne and to Sydney. I went twice. Quite different going to Sydney. Melbourne, you just of course walk through. In Sydney, there was more checks there, and it probably was a 30-minute delay, but certainly not the length of time that people think it is. I think in places, once proof of vaccine, I think the departure is going to be more difficult and lengthy in process at airports than the arrivals. But by and large, I don't think airlines see it as their problem at the moment to have to check these things, and that's why if you go on a domestic flight and you're only going from level 4 to level 3, we are down to level 2. They don't even check the certificates that you've got. They just assume you've got them, and I think the airline employees just don't think it's their job to police these, and it's probably not their job to police that, particularly inside New Zealand. The process time also for we're going to be getting quarantine certificates and apps and all sorts of things. The IATA passes, everybody's incredibly slow about adopting stuff, but there's already things in motion. Michael Barnett's been talking about the Chamber of Commerce app, which all the chambers of commerce around the world and their network have been talking about and adopting. That, for me, seems to be the right way to go for admission to things like restaurants, Rhythm and Vines, for all the things. It's something that works around the city. And the IATA Travel Pass is logically the one that all airlines should just be adopting straight away. And basically, you can upload your vaccination certificate onto the IATA Travel Pass. Already about 12 airlines have embraced it and adopted it. So you would think it's a bit of a waste of time reinventing the wheel with that. But that's the one I would suggest that Air New Zealand will also adopt if people fly in New Zealand. Qantas is adopting it for the Qantas travellers out there. And Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa's got it, United Airlines is embracing it. So quite a few airlines that are common sense airlines that are getting behind that IATA effort. The final slide is a little bit about your business. So reshaping your travel policy, you'll all have employees who travel. So firstly, once you talk them into wanting to travel, the objectives of your travel program will change a little bit. So when I talk about a travel policy for companies, your objectives are many, and they vary from company to company. Some want a really high level duty of care program. Some want to improve traveller compliance. Some just want to drive savings. Some want to drive really great service, and some just want to drive booking efficiency. So there's a whole range of different things, and people take combinations of basically those broad subjects, and that's what our company specialise in, is advising companies on how to fulfil these. But the duty of care and the other piece of the puzzle here is sustainability is the other important feature. But if you want to chart an effective roadmap, you need to collaborate with your employees, but you also need to bring in more people. And I think sometimes a company travel policy, when we ask who devised their travel policy, they often say it was the CFO, or it was the boss's EA, or it was a travel manager in the company. Very rarely was it ever the HR department. But right now you need a multi-community approach to your travel policy, because it's so important, because you're sending people out into a COVID world, and it's quite a different beast. So we've had 18 months of collecting dust on most travel policies, and it's time to really, I think, to blow the dust off and have a good look at it. But certainly get your travel agent and into the equation and have a discussion about what is practical, what's possible, and what can be done for you, if it's duty of care, if it's traveller compliance, if it's the savings you want to generate, if it's better service you're trying to get, or better booking efficiency. The one thing is for sure, though, you need a really good travel agent these days, a really proactive one, because things change so much. You need a third party really just looking out for you and having your back when it comes to that. And part of the duty of care thing is really important now. So a lot of our clients take advantage of our traveller tracking. So literally what happened on the day that Jacinda gets up there on the podium of truth and says we're closing down at midnight, you'd be amazed at how many companies don't know where half of their staff are, half of their travellers. So if you've got 25 travellers in your company, 50 travellers, or whether you've got 5 travellers in your company or 3 travellers, many of you don't know where they are at a single moment in time. And our traveller tracker, or your travel agent, should definitely be telling you that. But we have a traveller tracker which is attached to our online booking tool, which means you just can see where everybody is around the country. You can text them straight away from that particular piece of technology and just say, are you there? Are you on your way home? Do you need help? So we do that. We sit in the background anyway, and we know where your travellers are. But you'd be amazed at the number of companies who don't know where their travellers are. Sometimes it's quite interesting to find out actually where they are. So you've got to know where they are to be able to act really quickly, and you've got to get repatriate people back from lots of different places to their home base. Otherwise they're going to get stuck there or have to get permission to travel back to their home base. The other area of duty of care is particularly around hotels. That's been a real struggle. If you've got, to cliche it, I'm sorry, and to be a little bit sexist, but if you've got a single female traveller and she ends up in a hotel or a motel that's, somebody that the office has selected, and she ends up next to a mongrel mob member, that's not particularly conducive environment, and that's a reality, a harsh reality of business travel at the moment. Basis of will your travellers go with other unvaccinated travellers to places? This is a much wider subject. We don't really want to get into it here too much, because it all comes down to whether or not you're letting unvaccinated travellers inside your offices, inside your company, and it's a very broad subject. But it comes down to, if you're not allowing your vaccinated employees into the office, why are you letting them go next to unvaccinated travellers on an aeroplane? So you may well end up, particularly for international travellers, with staff members asking if they can fly business class or premium economy, for example, just to have that notion of separation. So that's a review of the travel budget a little bit, and just depends how important the traveller is and how important the trip is as to whether or not you want to renew your travel policy. The other part of it is travellers not happy actually travelling, actually using different rental car companies who don't have the same cleaning protocols, that kind of thing. And so that's where we can provide that kind of information, but you've got to have a willingness from inside your organisation to have a look at all of these particular things. If it's savings, let's talk about your supplier services. A lot of you would have signed contract, the larger organisations of you would have signed contracts with airlines, with rental car companies, with hotels, and you're certainly not making your market share or your volume targets for them. And that's simply a matter of having a discussion and having somebody who can go in and have a discussion, a third-party discussion with an airline. So we do that. Paul poses the question about pricing. The airfares, I would say at the moment, if you're talking European airfares, they're actually not too different from what they have been, aside from some individual economy class fares have been probably in the late 3,000s, whereas previously there would have been 2.5 to 3, let's say. So they're probably about 30% higher. In premium economy and business class, they're all about the same. They're all roughly the same kind of pricing. So the other objectives is around travel is and savings is the wastage with unused tickets and airline ticket credits, which have been a real challenge for many companies to try and get their head around. So we obviously look after that for our clients, but a number who deal just directly with Air New Zealand for their domestic travel or have a travel agent who doesn't necessarily have the same tools and equipment that we have. People are sitting on so many unused ticket credits, and they've recently, with Air New Zealand particularly, they have been extended by a few months. We've got some really chunky airline credits sitting out there with Air New Zealand. If you think they were $12,000 and $10,000 business class tickets through to Europe with Air New Zealand, it takes a hell of a lot of flights to Wellington and Christchurch to try and use them up, and just being able to control those has been a particular challenge. Come down to booking efficiency, that might be an area you might be looking at, and that's we work with booking engines. We work with Serco Zeno, which is a New Zealand product. We work with Concur, which is a very fine SAP program for booking tools, and sometimes that can add booking efficiency and sometimes it can take away, because they don't suit every company and every organisation. We'll jump over to that last slide if that's all right. Let's talk about you. So with Air New Zealand, Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines, Lufthansa and Qatar, these are the 4 primary airlines that most people would use, and Qantas as well. Most of them have had some sort of extension to their personal travel statuses. So either you're with Air New Zealand, you're Gold or Gold Elite or 1. Cathay Pacific, you're either Marco Polo or Singapore Airlines, you're PPS. Lufthansa, you're an on or you're not. And Qatar just has, literally, they just have gold, silver and whatever, steel, something like that. Yeah, so most have extended these out to the end of 2022 at the moment. The most proactive has actually been Cathay Pacific. They've just been the first off the mark every time to extend people's statuses, extend people's miles. So Air New Zealand with their air points, they're absolutely keen for you to burn them all. They need you to fly something, fly an Air New Zealand flight. If you're just not flying at the moment, they want you to spend all of your air points in some shop, you know, in their online shopping tools. So they are keen to for people to burn miles. Whereas somebody like Qantas has extended your mile usage. You're supposed to fly at least some kind of flight or Qantas service within an 18-month period, I think I recall. But they've now extended that out for 3 or 4 years, so your miles are safe for a period of time. Singapore Airlines is the same with their KrisFlyer miles, and Lufthansa with Miles and More. We don't have a lot of Miles and More travellers based in New Zealand. We have a few who are German expatriates who book with us, but most are Air New Zealand, put their Star Alliance miles on Air New Zealand, so the miles end up in the Air New Zealand bank. So with that, I think you're probably fairly safe for most, but you would want to get back travelling quite soon. And airlines like Singapore Airlines, Air New Zealand have got a lot of closed lounges at the moment. You have to not assume that you have a lounge open to you. So that traveller coming back from Singapore, they've suddenly closed the lounge in Singapore for travellers for the next 2 weeks. So suddenly you're without a lounge, and things like that are quite important to travellers. So as we said before, travel's not for the faint-hearted. It's for people who are pretty flexible in their thought process and pretty chilled out and don't get too phased by different things. Let's talk about vaccines. Most of these airlines, except for Air New Zealand and Qantas, have not mandated vaccines on board their aircraft. So they're all pretty well mandated them for, so United Airlines, Delta, American Airlines in the States as well, British Airways in the United Kingdom have mandated them for their employees who are flying, their operational staff, so basically the flight attendants and the airport staff or the customer facing staff, but they're actually not mandated for travellers. So Qantas and Air New Zealand are in a slightly unique position. The limitation of this, it was sort of a non-announcement by Air New Zealand and Qantas, because actually most countries that they're flying to, you can't get in unless you're vaccinated anyway. And so the rules were made for them. So it was a good out for the government the other day when they said, no, they're not going to mandate compulsory vaccinations for New Zealand citizens. Well, the New Zealand citizens on board an Air New Zealand flight can't board the thing anyway, because they can't land in the place they were going to without that vaccination. And that just comes back to the complexity of travel. So that's all the notes I've got for the moment. Let's just look at some questions.
Great. Thomas has got one. Will Air New Zealand extend the option and credit past the 1st of October?
The credits go through to, we've got the credits until then, but people get a little bit confused. The credit is absolutely fine for another 12 months beyond that, because it's to do with the booking timeline of the booking timeline of the ticket. So if you book a ticket on the 31st of December this year, for example, it's valid for another 12 months. And they look like they're going to be trying to get people to book those tickets, even though they haven't got a lot of flights in the system. Yeah, so you can do that, but then if it rolls over again, you'll just run it into another credit. So the Qantas, we're sitting on a reasonable number of Qantas credits, and for clients, and they have extended them out another well into 2022. So they're just sitting there as a cash arrangement. Jetstar has done the same. For those of you who fly up and down the country on Jetstar, they also have extended their credits as well. That's just part of the Qantas group.
Thomas.
Sorry, Grant, my question was actually in regards to the credits that are right up until the 31st of October. If you have flights booked prior to that, you can actually easily push them into credits. However, we have quite a few staff members who have booked trips to Auckland or around the country that is beyond the 31st of October, and at the moment it doesn't allow them to cancel and move the flights into credit, because Air New Zealand kept that at the 31st of October. Yeah,
have those flights actually been cancelled by Air New Zealand?
No, our staff doesn't want to travel, and in the past it was easy just to cancel it, but we can't do that for anything that's booked beyond the 31st of October at this point in time.
Yeah, so you have to be careful about that. So a few clients we heard rushed out and cancelled their flights. You have to wait till the airline has actually cancelled your flight before they call it a proper COVID credit. If you're cancelling it yourself because you think you can't travel due to COVID-19, you're still up for the change fees on those particular flights. And so with that particular case of the October 31 deadline, the money is held in credit at the moment, is that correct? Or the ticket is just sitting as a ticket, as an open ticket?
It's sitting as a ticket. So it's in November this year.
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting one. You have to wait, literally you have to wait till Air New Zealand cancels the flight, and then they allow a ticket. Then they allow credit. But I can have a look at some of those cases for you, Thomas, if you want me to.
Grant, what about travel insurance for overseas travel?
Yeah, so travel insurance companies. Is there any insurance companies on the call before I get myself into trouble? No. No, they're lousy, and they're the weakest link in the whole travel chain. It's been said. It's been put on tape. You're taping this still, Monique?
Yep, absolutely.
No, they've been awful, I've got to say. So basically, you can get travel insurance now for your trip away, but they'll only cover you. I beg your pardon, not sponsor you. Cover you if you catch COVID-19 whilst you're away traveling. So if you can prove that you caught COVID-19 when you go